Imagine a signal cutting through the static of every radio, television, and phone on the planet. A voice not of this world, repeating three chilling words: survival is adaptation. At first, it sounds like a glitch, a cosmic prank. Then the fever starts. Within days, hospitals overflow. Within weeks, millions are gone. But here's the twist no one saw coming. The ones who make it through the fever wake up different. Stronger, faster, sharper. And that's when humanity realizes this wasn't an invasion. It was an exam. The aliens didn't come to conquer us. They sent a plague to change us. Think about that for a second. A disease designed not to wipe us out, but to force an evolutionary leap. Governments scramble to contain the chaos, but how do you control people who can heal broken bones in hours or outrun speeding cars? The world fractures into two kinds of fear: those terrified of what the survivors might become, and those who see this as our only shot at catching up to the civilizations watching us from the stars. This isn't just a story about survival, it's about becoming something more. Picture a mother lifting a collapsed building off her child with bare hands. A scientist solving equations that once took supercomputers years, scribbling breakthroughs on napkins. Soldiers who don't need armor because their skin stops bullets. The rules of biology, physics, even society are being rewritten overnight. And the most haunting question isn't, why did they do this? It's, what happens when we pass their test? Strap in. We're about to explore how humanity turned an extinction-level event into our greatest upgrade, and why the aliens might regret ever pushing us this hard. Cities burned like matchsticks in those first weeks. Emergency rooms became war zones, packed with bodies writhing with 110-degree fevers, their veins glowing faintly blue under the skin. Governments collapsed faster than the infected. Curfews meant nothing to people who could leap over tanks or rip through barricades barehanded. And in the eye of this storm, Dr. Elena Vasquez crouched in a makeshift lab beneath Atlanta's ruined CDC headquarters, her gloves slick with the blood of patient zero. The man strapped to her table should have been dead a dozen times over. His heart stopped for 8 minutes during transport. His liver had liquefied, and yet his cells were stitching themselves back together faster than her microscopes could track, chromosomes rearranging like puzzle pieces clicking into some terrifying new design. When she zoomed in, the virus wasn't attacking his DNA, it was editing it. Look at the telomeres, she breathed to her assistant, voice cracking. They're not just repairing. They're optimizing. Outside, gunfire rattled as militias clashed with survivors sprinting up walls like spiders. But in that flickering lab light, Elena realized the truth a split second before her patient's eyes snapped open, violet irises glowing like nebulas. He yanked the Roman 4 from his arm, steel needle bending like tinfoil against his skin, and whispered something that made her blood freeze. Threshold achieved. Suddenly, the sirens and screams outside weren't just chaos. They were the sound of humanity's final exam, and the aliens weren't just watching, they were grading us. The Pentagon called it Operation Steel Curtain, a last-ditch effort to contain the outbreaks behind walls of razor wire and .50 caliber machine guns. They didn't account for Private Danny Carter, 19 years old and bleeding from his ears as he crawled out of an overrun field hospital, his muscles convulsing with something far worse than fever. By the time his unit found him, he could bend rifle barrels into pretzels. General Carter's orders crackled through every radio in the quarantine zone. Engage all hostiles with extreme prejudice. He didn't know his boy was one of them. Didn't know Danny was the one who ripped the turret off a Bradley fighting vehicle when they tried to gas his shelter. The military's playbook assumed enemies would break under fire. But how do you stop a kid who doesn't bleed when shot, who moves faster than the nervous system can register pain? Footage leaked from Fort Benning that night showed enhanced soldiers flickering through floodlights like ghosts, disassembling tanks with their bare hands. Not as weapons, as warnings. They weren't attacking, just walking through barricades like they were made of smoke. The general's voice kept screaming, "Hold the line." Right up until the moment his Humvee's door tore off its hinges, and Danny's glowing eyes stared back at him from the darkness. No rage there, just pity. "You were never the target, Dad," he whispered, tossing a crumpled photo between them, a satellite image of something massive hanging in low Earth orbit. "They're not testing us, they're testing you." That's when the first cities went dark, not from bombs or riots, because the enhanced were climbing transmission towers like spiders, shutting down grids in perfect synchronization. Not a war, a message, and in the silence between gunshots, every soldier still human finally heard it. The rules had changed. The quarantine wasn't keeping the infected in. It was keeping everyone else out. Tokyo's skyline burned in jagged silhouettes against the night, the neon glow of Shibuya Square replaced by the cold blue pulse of military drones scanning the streets below. Ren Soto wiped blood from his lip, fingers trembling not from fear but from the raw current of energy crackling just beneath his skin. 2 days ago, he'd been crouched in a cybercafe coding firewalls. Now the firewall was him, and the drones hunting his people were about to learn why that mattered. The first bot descended with a sniper's precision, targeting the cluster of survivors huddled beneath a shattered Konbini awning. Ren didn't raise a weapon, he flicked his wrist. The drone's rotors stuttered midair as if snagged on invisible wires, then crumpled inward like a soda can in a fist. Across the square, a dozen more survivors, office workers, students, grandmothers with grocery bags still clutched in their hands, mirrored his stance. The air rippled, drones rained down in a screeching hail of twisted metal. "Listen to their radios," hissed Yumi, a barrister who'd gone from steaming milk to splitting concrete with her fingertips. The military chatter crackled through a looted earpiece. "Subjects exhibiting synchronized neural activity, recommend immediate." Ren crushed the device in his palm, grinning. That was the thing about telekinesis no tactical briefing could prepare for. It wasn't just moving objects, it was moving ideas. When his voice roared through the chaos, "They wanted us weak, now we'll show them strong." The cry echoed through Tokyo's ruins not as defiance but as a fact. By dawn, the enhanced had rerouted the city's power grid through their collective will, turning billboards into blinding weapons. But Ren wasn't just fighting for control of the streets. Every intercepted drone carried fragments of a transmission coordinates, repeating in a loop. Not from Earth, and the message threading through the static wasn't a warning, it was an invitation. The hologram burned into existence above every major city simultaneously, its towering form casting jagged shadows across the ruins. 6 limbs, eyes like fractured glass, not the sleek aliens of human fiction, but something older, sharper, a creature carved by harder stars. Its voice wasn't broadcast through speakers. It vibrated in the bones of every living thing, a frequency that made teeth ache. Your species was slated for extinction. The words landed like a guillotine blade. The plague was mercy, prove you deserve it. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Then the riots began. Normal humans smashed storefronts with rebar, screaming about trickery and vivisection. Enhanced like Danny and Ren just stared, because they'd felt it, the way their hearts synced to the hologram's pulse, like tuning forks recognizing the same note. Elena Vasquez, crouched in her ruined lab, watched her violet-eyed patient rise and salute the projection without a word. That's when she understood the truth. This wasn't a first contact, it was grading period. The plague hadn't been a bioweapon, it was a standardized test, and the enhanced were the cheat sheets. What the aliens called mercy, humanity had weaponized into evolution. Now the question tearing through refugee camps and burning military bases wasn't whether to fight back, but who to fight for. The uninfected saw conquerors, the enhanced they saw the finish line of a race they never knew they were running. And as the hologram's eyes tracked the chaos below, its final unspoken warning thrummed in the enhanced like a second heartbeat. Surviving was phase 1. Now comes the real exam. The syringe trembled in Elena's hand, its contents swirling with an eerie bioluminescence, not just a cure, but a key. Her monitors screamed warnings about irreversible genomic contamination, but the numbers didn't frighten her anymore. They fascinated her. Every simulation pointed to the same conclusion. The virus wasn't random, it was elegant, a precision tool carving humanity into something new, with logic so flawless it made her previous Nobel-winning research look like child's scribbles. She didn't flinch when the needle broke skin. The pain was a lightning strike, brief, brutal, then gone. Then the world unfolded. Her retinas burned as her vision telescoped down to the cellular level, watching her own bloodstream in real time. White blood cells split like atoms, rewriting their own code mid-mission. Neurons in her cortex fired in symphonic patterns, unlocking synaptic pathways that shouldn't exist. The lab's flickering fluorescence became a strobing galaxy of refracted wavelengths, each pulse whispering secrets about quantum states she could suddenly taste. Her knees hit the floor, her laugh cracked like glass. "Oh God," she rasped, watching dust motes hover like planets caught in orbital calculus. "It's beautiful." Across the room, her violet-eyed patient nose specimen smiled for the first time. "You're seeing the scaffolding now," he murmured, tapping his temple. "The architecture they built into us." Elena's breath hitched because he was right. The plague wasn't a pathogen. It was a blueprint, a curriculum, and humanity had just been shoved into graduate-level evolutionary biology without a syllabus. Her shaking fingers dialed the Pentagon's emergency line. Let the generals panic about super soldiers and telekinetic riots. She'd found the real threat. The virus didn't just enhance. It educated, and the homework it assigned, either pass or be erased from the cosmic grading curve. The sewers beneath Johannesburg hummed with something darker than rats and runoff. Malik pressed his palm against the dripping concrete wall, feeling the pulse of the city above like a second heartbeat. 16 years old, and his veins burned as if someone had replaced his blood with liquid sunlight. Around him, 24 fugitives crouched in the flickering glow of stolen emergency lights, teachers who could bend metal with their thoughts, street kids who outran bullets, nurses whose touch knit flesh like scar tissue. All enhanced, all hunted, a woman with silver-streaked hair, they called her Mama Njikobo, held up a plasma bag swollen with dark blood. "They cut us off from hospitals," she said, slicing the bag open with a fingernail sharpened to a scalpel's edge. "So we make our own." The liquid swirled in midair, defying gravity as she guided it into Malik's outstretched palm. The moment it touched his skin, the blood ignited. Not metaphorically, blue flames licked up his arm, dancing between his fingers like tame serpents. The others didn't flinch, they leaned in. Above them, police helicopters thrummed like angry wasps, spotlights carving through manhole covers. Malik clenched his fist. The fire responded like a living thing, twisting into a perfect helix, then erupted upward through the grates in a searing column. For 3 breathless seconds, Johannesburg's night sky wore a burning glyph, a phoenix wrought in plasma, wings spread wide enough to shadow 4 city blocks. From the darkness below came a chorus of whispers rising to a chant. "From ashes we rise," not a slogan, a promise, because Malik wasn't just making fire. He was reading the genetic library in that borrowed blood, learning pyrokinesis from a dead man's DNA like flipping through a borrowed textbook. That's when the first tremors hit, not from the helicopters, but from the Earth itself. Across the tunnel, a girl no older than 12 pressed her palms to the ground, her eyes reflecting magma light. The enhanced weren't just sharing abilities now. They were stacking them, and the city above, it was about to learn why some fires can't be put out. The White House Situation Room smelled like stale coffee and panic. President Harlan gripped the edge of the conference table, his reflection warped in the polished wood as generals pointed to glowing red dots on the map: New York, Chicago, Los Angeles. Project Cleansing is the only play we have left, growled Defense Secretary Voss, sliding a folder across the table. Satellite photos showed enhanced lifting school buses like cardboard boxes. They're not human anymore, sir. Containment failed. This is pest control. What none of them noticed was Corporal Rachel lie blinking 3 times in rapid succession behind the president's shoulder, a signal. Her retinal implants, undetectable beneath brown contacts, streamed every document, every trembling hand on that table, to 12 million enhanced watching through her eyes. The moment the president's pen touched paper, Chicago already knew. The first fighter jets screamed toward Lake Michigan at dawn. Colonel Ezra Briggs stood on the tarmac at Wright-Patterson, watching his squadron fuel up. He'd spent 20 years following orders, but when his comms crackled with a child's voice, "They're bombing us, Daddy," his hands moved before his brain caught up. The safety clicked off his sidearm. His CO didn't even turn around before the barrel pressed into his spine. "Change of plans, sir," Ezra hissed, thumbing his mic live to every military frequency. "We're not the cleaners today, we're the warning." Above Manhattan, 2 F-35s veered off course, executing perfect midair flips to train their missiles on each other. The pilots' shared laughter rattled through the Pentagon speakers, twins from Queens, both enhanced, both grinning as their targeting systems locked. "You hearing this, Mr. President?" One taunted, while below them fire hydrants erupted like geysers, water arcing to form a shimmering shield over Brooklyn. "We don't need your bombs, we are the bombs." By noon, 3 congressional aides leaked the cleansing files to every news outlet still standing. Footage of airstrike blueprints burned across social media, overlaid with timestamps counting down to the president's own handwriting, authorization granted. The real explosion wasn't in the skies, it was in the streets where normal humans who'd spent weeks fearing the enhanced now saw the truth. Their own leaders had just signed death warrants for entire cities. A National Guardsman in Dallas threw down his rifle, staring at the live feed on his phone. His lieutenant grabbed his shoulder. "Stand your post, soldier." The kid, 19, acne still scarring his cheeks, just turned with hollow eyes. "No, sir, you just made me choose between my government and my sister." He tapped his chest where a hospital band peeked beneath his uniform. The name matched an ICU patient in the quarantine zone. "Guess what side I'm on?" The betrayal burned fastest through the military. Enhanced medics refused to heal officers, logistics officers misplaced ammunition shipments, and in a bunker beneath Nebraska, a 6-star general awoke to find his security detail gone, replaced by 4 enhanced privates he'd ordered sterilized last month. They didn't touch him, just played the president's authorization on loop while their eyes glowed violet. "Enjoy the audio, sir," one whispered, welding the door shut behind them. "It's the last orders you'll ever hear." By dusk, Project Cleansing wasn't a protocol, it was a punchline. The missiles never launched, the enhanced didn't even fight back. They just held up a mirror, and humanity flinched at what stared back. Silver ships cracked the sky above Manhattan like jagged mirrors, reflecting a sun that wasn't there. No warning, no grand entrance, just the deafening groan of gravity itself buckling as those knife-edged hulls settled over the Statue of Liberty's torch, casting shadows that moved wrong, slithering across skyscrapers like living things. Then the drones dropped, not machines, not exactly, more like wasps spun from liquid metal and bone, their wings buzzing with a sound that made teeth vibrate loose in their sockets. The first one landed on a fire escape near Times Square, its segmented abdomen flexing to reveal a mouth lined with spinning scalpels. A construction worker named Javier froze mid-sprint, clutching his daughter's hand. The drone's faceless head tilted, scanning them with a beam of cyan light that seared fingerprints off Javier's skin. Genetic redundancy detected. It droned, voice like a chainsaw chewing through glass. Culling protocol initiated. That's when the enhanced hit back, A blur of denim and knuckles Javier barely registered the woman who vaulted over a taxicab to slam into the drone at 90 miles an hour. Maria, a cafeteria worker from the Bronx, had spent 3 days hiding in a subway tunnel with her veins burning blue. Now she gripped the drone's thrashing wings in fists that could crumple steel I-beams, her sneakers screeching against asphalt as she twisted. The sound was unforgettable, not machinery breaking, not metal snapping, the wet pop of something that had never been meant to break at all. Maria wasn't alone. Across the city, enhanced surged toward the drones like antibodies attacking a virus. A barrister from Queens intercepted a midair strike with her bare palms, letting the kinetic energy ripple up her arms before pushing back. The drone shattered like a wine glass hit by a shockwave. In Battery Park, a 12-year-old boy who'd once needed leg braces now moved faster than the drones could track, plucking them from the sky like rotten fruit. And on the Brooklyn Bridge, a group of nurses still in scrubs crusted with old blood stood back to back, their combined telekinesis weaving a net of crumpled drones above the East River. But the real shock wasn't the enhanced fighting, it was the uninfected cheering. Office workers leaned out shattered windows, screaming support. Cops lowered their guns. An old man in a threadbare suit flung his cane at a drone like a javelin, roaring, "That's my grandkid you're after." For the first time since the fever, the divide between normal and enhanced didn't matter. The aliens had made one fatal miscalculation. They'd assumed humanity would stay fractured. Then the silver ships opened, not to release more drones, to watch. Their underbellies ear-eyed apart like camera lenses, revealing cavernous holds where shadowy figures loomed, not invading, not retreating, just observing. Maria wiped drone fluid off her face, panting. The taste of it was metallic, sour, wrong. This wasn't an attack, she muttered, watching the nearest ship's aperture contract. It was a filter. Above her, the Statue of Liberty's torch flickered once, then blazed to life with an unnatural violet glow, casting every shattered drone, every bloodied survivor in stark relief. The message was clearer than any transmission. Phase 1 complete, welcome to the next round. Elena's fingers spasmed across the chalkboard, snapping 3 sticks of white chalk before switching to charcoal, then her own fingernails when that ran out. 72 hours she'd been lost in the vision, her body rigid as a corpse while her enhanced neurons fired in patterns that scorched the inside of her skull. Now the CDC lab walls were a constellation of equations and star maps, intersecting in ways that made physicists weep. Her assistant trembled behind her, clutching a syringe of sedatives that wouldn't work, not on whatever Elena had become. The final symbol she carved wasn't mathematics. It was a predator's silhouette, all spines and thrashing tendrils, wrapping around a crude solar system like a noose. The coordinates aren't an invitation. She rasped, her throat raw from days without water. Blood streaked the chalkboard where her nail beds had split. They're a trail, these things that tested us, they're refugees. Across the room, the violet-eyed specimen subject Alpha went very still. His glow pulsed once, hard, like a lighthouse beam cutting through fog. When he spoke, the words landed like stones in still water. You saw the devourers, not a question, a confirmation. Elena's knees gave out, her assistant lunged, but it was Alpha who caught her, his hands burning hotter than human skin should. The visions came in flashes, alien cities crumbling into fractal dust, silver ships fleeing in ragged formations. Entire species uploaded into glowing data crystals moments before their worlds folded inward. Worst of all, the pattern, always the same: first contact, the plague, the testing, then, if a species proved resilient enough, the warning. They didn't engineer the virus to make us stronger, Elena whispered, staring at her bleeding hands. They engineered it to make us loud, a distress signal written in DNA. Above her, the lab's flickering lights caught the edges of her chalkboard galaxy, revealing the truth she'd unknowingly drawn. The aliens' coordinates weren't pointing toward Earth. They were arrows aimed outward into the black, a roadmap. Alpha's grip tightened. "They're not grading us," he said softly. "They're recruiting." Outside, the enhanced masses gathered in streets across the world, their abilities evolving faster than science could track. None of them knew yet, none of them understood what their genes were really for: to be a beacon, a war cry, and somewhere beyond the edge of the solar system, something ancient and hungry had just started swimming toward the light. Lagos burned bright that night, not with fire but with defiance. From the crumbling roof of the Nigerian Television Authority building, Adunni Adebayo gripped a severed satellite dish like a scepter, her bare feet planted on coils of severed fiber optic cable. The broadcast shouldn't have worked, the grid was down, but when she touched the transmitter, something in her blood hummed, and suddenly every screen from Accra to Abuja flickered to life with her face. "They told us we were sick," she announced, her voice echoing through market stalls and military bunkers alike. Behind her, a dozen enhanced teens fused their fingers into the tower's wiring, their collective bioelectricity overriding every firewall. But sickness doesn't build. The camera panned to the street below, where a mechanic, once struggling to feed his family, now welded a collapsed bridge back together with nothing but the heat radiating from his palms. In Moscow, the signal tore through state-controlled airwaves like a scalpel. Oligarchs watching their encrypted channels gasped as ballet dancers from the Bolshoi pirouetted through riot police, their movements so precise they could disarm a battalion without breaking rhythm. "The virus didn't change us," whispered a prima ballerina, her toe shoes shredding a tear gas canister midair. "It unlocked us." Kremlin towers trembled as subway workers below synchronized their heartbeats, sending seismic pulses through the foundations. Not to collapse them, to rearrange the bricks into towering glyphs no human architect could fathom. And in the Kenyan highlands, a lone Maasai farmer named Jelani let out a whoop as he hoisted a government tank over his head like a gourd of water, its treads still spinning helplessly in the air. His village, once deemed too remote to matter, now stood ringed by enhanced warriors deflecting bullets with woven shields, their patterning so precise it bent light. "You keep talking about quarantine zones," Jelani laughed, the tank's barrel crumpling like paper in his grip. "But the fence was never to keep us in." He nodded to the horizon, where enhanced children sprinted faster than drones toward the border, their laughter crackling over radios in 6 languages. This wasn't coordinated, wasn't planned, yet from Seoul to Sao Paulo the same truth flared like a chain reaction. The old world's walls were illusions. A banker in Frankfurt grew diamond filaments from his fingertips to rewire stock exchanges. Inuit hunters in Nunavut telepathically steered narwhal pods to blockade oil rigs. And in a Delhi slum, a grandmother's lullaby synced 1,000 enhanced heartbeats into a rhythmic counterpoint that short-circuited surveillance cameras for miles. The most terrifying part, none of them were taking orders, no manifestos, no leaders, just a species waking up to its own latent potential, and realizing the only rule that still mattered was the one etched in their marrow: adapt or die. When the next alien transmission crackled through every enhanced mind simultaneously, it wasn't a voice, it was a sensation vibrating down to the atomic level. The unmistakable thrill of a predator catching fresh scent. Jelani dropped the tank, dust swirling around his calloused feet. He didn't need to hear the words to understand. The testing phase was over, now came the hunt. Ren's fingers danced across the cracked screen of a scavenged tablet, his pupils dilating as alien symbols cascaded through his vision, not decoded but understood, as if the virus had rewired his brain to speak in galactic shorthand. Around him, the enhanced crowded into the gutted remains of a Tokyo server farm, their collective body heat melting frost off broken monitors. "They lied," he muttered, teeth clenched as the data stung his synapses. The map unfolding wasn't a star chart, it was a graveyard. One by one, the worlds flickered into focus, dozens of them, each tagged with the same emblem, a spiral devouring its own tail. Some showed continents sheared clean off as if bitten. Others pulsed with eerie regularity, their atmospheres threaded with glowing veins that couldn't be natural. And every last one bore timestamps clustering around a single, horrifying pattern, exactly 53 years after their first contact, after their plagues. After their enhancements, they don't test species to uplift them, Wren hissed, jabbing at a planet frozen mid-shatter. They test us to see who survives long enough to warn the rest. The room swayed. A telekinetic from Osaka vomited over a dead server rack, her nausea contagious. Across the Pacific, Elena's chalkboard prophecies suddenly made gruesome sense. The devourers weren't just coming. They'd already picked the bones of civilizations stronger than Earth's. The debate erupted like a plasma arc. "We run," screamed a teenager who could phase through walls. "We hide," begged a former surgeon now knitting flesh like yarn. Wren silenced them by slamming his palm onto a power conduit, flooding the room with a hologram so vast it swallowed the walls. At its center, Earth glowed untouched for now, with a countdown ticking down from 53 years. "They didn't send the plague to save us," he said, voice cracking with the weight of revelation. "They sent it because they couldn't." The map zoomed out, revealing the truth. The alien ships orbiting Earth weren't scouts. They were lifeboats, their crews' violet eyes hollow with grief. "They're not our judges, they're the last survivors of the previous test subjects. And we," Wren's fingers curled into fists, the hologram strobing crimson. "We're the only ones left to break the cycle." Outside, the sky rippled as if in agreement, not with silver ships this time, but with something darker farther away. Watching, waiting, the countdown pulsed once, then the screens went black. The first alien boots hit the tarmac of Johannesburg's abandoned airport at dawn, their armored soles clicking against concrete in perfect, eerie synchronization. Plasma rifles hummed to life with a sound like wasps trapped in glass. Then the screaming started, but not from humans, from them. A 7-year-old girl in a tattered Disney sweatshirt was the first to step forward, her pigtails swaying as she kicked a soda can toward the invaders. The lead alien fired instinctively, the plasma bolt sizzling through the air only to stop mid-flight, suspended in a shimmering bubble of distorted light. The girl giggled, twirling her finger. The bolt pirouetted, then reversed. What followed wasn't a battle, it was a revelation. Construction workers from the airport's unfinished terminals leapt from 5th-story scaffolding, landing with cat-like grace to disarm aliens twice their size. A street vendor who'd once struggled to lift his cooler now hurled a parked cargo plane's wing like a discus, shearing through 3 dropships in a single throw. And the laughter, God, the laughter as enhanced grandmothers folded plasma fire into origami shapes with their bare hands, tossing the glowing paper cranes back at stunned alien troops. The invaders' tactical feeds later scavenged from their helmets showed frantic biomechanical readouts. Target agility exceeds parameters, energy deflection impossible per known physics. Threat reassessment, immediate retreat advised, but the real horror in those recordings wasn't the data. It was the audio, because beneath the aliens' guttural panic, you could hear human children singing playground rhymes as they dismantled a war machine meant to genocide worlds. By noon, the landing zone looked less like a battlefield and more like a grotesque art installation. Alien armor melted into modernist sculpture by a telekinetic welder. Plasma rifles knotted into Celtic knots by a busker with enhanced dexterity. One Marine, the enhanced equivalent of a court jester, had even arranged captured helmets into a smiley face visible from orbit. The message was clearer than any transmission. Humanity hadn't just passed the aliens' test, we'd rewritten the answer key, and as the last dropship fled, its hull scorched by concentrated sunlight reflected off a teenager's braces, the truth settled over the battlefield. The galaxy had sent its best warriors to cull us. We sent back hopscotch champions and lunch ladies, and we won. The vial glowed between Elena's fingers like captured lightning, its contents swirling with something beyond science, something alive. Around her, the ruins of the CDC lab trembled as alien ships scoured the city, their scanners pinging off the rubble like hungry bats. She'd spent 3 sleepless nights tearing apart her own research, stitching together fragments of the plague's code with alien transmission patterns until the answer clicked. Their technology wasn't hardware. It was biology, and biology could be hacked. Her hands didn't shake as she loaded the syringe. They vibrated, humming at a frequency that made the air crackle. The formula wasn't a weapon. It was a key one that burned through her veins the second she pressed the plunger home. Fireworks exploded behind her eyelids, synapses rewriting themselves too fast for pain to register. The monitors screamed as her vital signs spiked off the charts, then flatlined, or would have if her heart still needed to beat. Alpha lunged for her, his violet eyes wide with something like grief. How strange that the first alien to understand humans would mourn one. "You're not fuel," he rasped, gripping her wrist. She just smiled, flexing her fingers. The skin was already translucent, light seeping through the cracks. "No," she whispered, watching the glow spread up her arms like dawn breaking. "I'm the message." Outside, the nearest alien ship shuddered mid-scan, its hull flickering as Elena's virus tore through its systems. The effect spread like contagion. One ship, then a dozen, their weapons powering down in unison as her code rewrote their directives. Somewhere in the chaos, Alpha heard her voice echoing through every comm channel, every enhanced mind, a final broadcast woven into the static. They thought strength was survival. We proved its choice. By the time the light consumed her completely, the alien fleet was already turning skyward, their engines flaring not with retreat, but something far more terrifying: recognition. And deep in their encrypted databanks, a single phrase glowed in human script, scrawled in the language of rewritten DNA. Test concluded. Subjects upgraded. The alien armada shuddered as one, their obsidian hulls flickering like dying embers in Earth's upper atmosphere. The virus, Elena's last gift, had no off switch. It slithered through their systems with the same ruthless elegance as the original plague, rewriting alien code in human terms. One by one, thrusters sputtered. Weapons systems sighed into silence, and then something unprecedented happened. The ships sang. Not a dirge of defeat, but a keening, harmonic wail that vibrated skyscrapers down to their foundations. Alpha stood on the ruins of Cape Canaveral's launchpad, his violet eyes tracking the retreat. He didn't need translation tech to understand the envoy's final broadcast. It wasn't encrypted. It was weeping, carried on every frequency from AM radio to the thermal signatures of toaster ovens. You were the first to evolve, not obey. The words hung in the air like a confession. Humanity hadn't just beaten the test, we'd broken the grading system. Down in Tokyo, Ren collapsed to his knees as the psychic backlash hit. 53 years, the countdown wasn't a doomsday clock, it was a generation marker. Every species before us had used their enhancements to flee or fortify. We'd weaponized ours into something the galaxy had never seen: community. A street vendor in Mumbai shared neural bandwidth with a cosmonaut in Siberia. Grandmothers in Lagos taught teenagers in Denver how to bend gravity like basket reeds. The aliens hadn't just lost a battle, they'd witnessed the birth of a new evolutionary language. As the last silver ships blurred into starlight, the real work began. Enhanced hands lifted rubble without being asked. A kindergarten teacher in Santiago knit shattered bones back together through lullabies. And in a Berlin bunker, a child's finger painting smudged with glowing algae from his own tears revealed a perfect schematic of the Devourer's home system. The message was clear: we weren't just surviving anymore, we were learning. The skies cleared, the world exhaled. And in the silence between heartbeats, humanity felt it, the itch in their DNA, the whisper at the base of their skulls. Not a warning, an invitation. Somewhere out there, the Devourers were coming, and for the first time in galactic history, something was coming back for them. The dust still smelled of melted asphalt where Malik's fire had carved a scar half a mile long across Johannesburg's ruins. a line so deep it gleamed with molten glass at the bottom, still cooling under the African sun. Politicians from the old regime stood frozen on one side, their tailored suits gone grey with ash. On the other, enhanced children kicked pebbles into the fissure, listening for the distant ping as stones vaporized midair. The divide wasn't just physical, it was ideological, genetic, and Malik, barefoot and 16, let the silence stretch until even the drones overhead stopped buzzing. "You keep voting on what to do with us," he said, flexing his fingers. Blue flames licked his calloused palms, casting jagged shadows over the makeshift parliament behind him, a cluster of repurposed cargo containers where enhanced elders held court without titles. "But we don't need your permission to exist." A murmur rippled through the unenhanced crowd. A senator from Cape Town opened his mouth, then shut it as Malik's fire flared brighter, etching the words "argue across this if you dare" into the earth in searing glyphs. The line wasn't a threat, it was a mirror. For weeks, the world's surviving governments had debated integration like it was a policy draft, not a biological revolution. They'd proposed registration databases, mandatory ability suppressants, even enclaves, as if enhanced could be neatly filed away between census reports and tax brackets. But how do you legislate a kid who dreams in sonar? Tax a woman who photosynthesizes? The answer crackled in Malik's molten trench. You don't. A general from the old South African Defense Force, his uniform sleeves pinned where an enhanced sniper's kiss had taken his arm, was the first to move. Not across the line, along it. His boots crunched broken glass as he walked the edge, staring into the abyss. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of a man who'd outlived his own relevance. "We spent centuries drawing borders," a bitter chuckle. "Turns out the last one's drawn for us." By dusk, the rift had a name, the scratch they called it, part joke, part monument. Enhanced graffiti artists telekinetically suspended paint midair to float above the divide, spelling out "welcome to the other side" in dripping neon. Unenhanced street vendors set up grills along the edge, selling kebabs to both factions while arguing football like the world hadn't ended. And in a dimly lit safe house 3 blocks west, Malik scrubbed soot from his hands as Mama and Jacobo pressed a cold Coke to his forehead. "Fire's easy, child," she murmured, nodding toward the window where the scratch glowed like a wound. "The hard part comes tomorrow, when they realize you didn't just split the earth." Her teeth flashed in the dark. "You split history." Somewhere over the Atlantic, the first enhanced-built wind turbines hummed to life, their blades spinning on frequencies only their creators could hear. The grid wouldn't need coal or oil anymore, just willing hands and the quiet understanding that some lines aren't meant to be crossed, they're meant to be read, like the opening sentence of a book no one knew they were already writing. The scaffolds around Elena's light groaned like living things, their titanium bones bending under the weight of gravity, or more accurately, the lack of it. Ren Soto floated in the zero-G construction bay, his fingertips tracing the ship's hull where alien alloy met human ingenuity in a seamless weld. The metal remembered its origins. It thrummed under his touch, responding to his bioelectric pulse like a tuning fork. This wasn't just engineering, it was conversation. Across the bay, a team of enhanced welders worked without torches, their palms superheating rivets through sheer friction, while exo-suit engineers, once confined to wheelchairs, danced along the hull on legs reinforced with alien nanocomposites. Ren hadn't chosen the ship's name lightly. Every circuit in its neural core bore Elena's fingerprints, her final broadcast encoded into the navigation matrix like a heartbeat. The console's holographic displays flickered to life at the brush of a thought, their interfaces designed not for buttons, but for the synaptic fire of a mind that could process quantum states as instinctively as breathing. The aliens had left blueprints in their wreckage, yes, but humanity had rewritten them. When the first volunteers boarded, they didn't carry weapons, they were weapons. A botanist from Kerala whose chlorophyll-enriched skin could photosynthesize starlight. a former Paralympian whose telekinetic range could deflect micrometeoroids. And then there was Javier, the construction worker from Times Square, now grinning as he calibrated the ship's gravity drive by singing to it, his vocal cords tuned to frequencies that made the reactor purr like a contented cat. The launch didn't need countdowns or fanfare. The moment Elena's light slipped its moorings, the sky itself seemed to lean in. Trajectory calculations unfolded in the crew's shared consciousness, a telepathic web woven by a choir of enhanced minds syncing across continents. The ship didn't burn fuel, it drank sunlight, dark matter, the ambient hum of the universe itself, and when it finally punched through the atmosphere, the sonic boom wasn't a sound. It was a chord resonating across every enhanced nervous system on Earth like a tuning fork struck against the spine of the cosmos. Somewhere in the void, the devourers would be waiting. But so would the echoes of a woman who'd turned herself into a message, and the laughter of children who'd once melted tanks with their fingertips. Humanity's first starship wasn't just a vessel. It was a promise written in fire and light. You tested us, now meet the answer. The hull of Elena's light shuddered as it pierced the atmosphere of a world whose name no one aboard could pronounce, only feel, like the stale aftertaste of a scream. Scans had shown cities once. Now there were just spiraling husks of organic towers, their rib-like structures bleached bone white under a sickly orange sun. The crew suited up in silence, their enhanced senses already recoiling from the static-laced wails pulsing through the planetary comms. No words, just static. And beneath it, the wet, rattling coughs of a species drowning in its own blood. Javier was the first to step onto the surface, his boots sinking into soil that crunched like dried coral. Christ, he muttered, his enhanced vision passing the ruins at speeds that should have been mercifully impossible. But there was no unseeing it. The streets weren't empty. They were carpeted bodies twisted in poses that spoke of muscles seizing mid-stride, mouths frozen in silent pleas. The plague had been here, and unlike humanity, these beings hadn't evolved. They'd broken, then movement, a flicker of shadow between collapsed spires. The crew's weapons snapped up on instinct, but Dr. Anya Petrova, once a pediatrician in Minsk, was already sprinting forward, her medkit slung over one shoulder. The source of the motion was a child, or what was left of one. Their carapace was split open along the thorax, leaking viscous blue fluid, and the 4 eyes that lifted to meet Anya's gaze were clouded with pain. No enhanced resilience here, just slow, choking decay. Anya didn't hesitate. She ripped off her glove with her teeth and pressed her bare palm to the child's chest, her capillaries igniting with the telltale cobalt shimmer of human adaptation. The reaction was instantaneous. The child arched, their carapace crackling as fresh chitin spun itself over gaps like liquid ceramic. The locals, those still alive, had been watching from the rubble. Now they surged forward, their multi-jointed limbs trembling as they reached for Anya. Not to attack, to touch. One elder, their exoskeleton pitted with lesions, collapsed to their knees, mandibles clicking in a rhythm that the ship's translators passed a heartbeat later. Miracles. The word wasn't reverence, it was recognition. These beings had known the plague's purpose. They'd just never met a species that passed the test. Javier's grip on his rifle loosened as the truth hit. The Devourers hadn't just slaughtered these people, they'd graded them, failed them, and now humanity stood in the ashes not as conquerors, but as walking proof that the universe's cruelest exam could be beaten. The Elder's voice rasped again, raw with something beyond hope. You are the answer. Behind them, Elena's light hummed, its engines whispering the only reply that mattered, yes. And we're not done yet. The alien scientist's breathing apparatus wheezed like a dying accordion as he slumped against the cracked observation deck of his derelict ship, his 6-fingered hand smearing blue ichor across the glass. Outside, the wreckage of his civilization spun silently. Entire cities flash-frozen mid-collapse, their spires bent like candle wax under some unfathomable heat. You misunderstand the hierarchy. He rasped, his vocal cords vibrating at a frequency that made the human delegate's teeth ache. One of his eyes had burst, weeping viscous fluid down a face that might have been regal once. Now it just looked tired. The Devourers don't consume worlds, they prune them. His remaining eye locked onto Dr. Anya Petrova, its pupil dilating until it swallowed the room. Your plague wasn't a test, it was a vaccine. The delegates recoiled as the alien's chest split open, not in gore, but in a holographic projection so vivid it stank of ozone and burnt copper. A galaxy spun above them, its spiral arms studded with blinking red markers. These are the unworthy, he whispered, species who failed to adapt. The Devourers leave them as warnings. The projection zoomed in on a pulsing green dot Earth. And these are the sharpened tools. Javier felt his enhanced muscles lock up as the truth detonated in his gut. All those battles, those sacrifices, they hadn't been fighting for survival. They'd been forging themselves. The aliens' laughter was a wet, broken thing. You think you beat us, we let you. The only way to survive the Devourers is to create something they can't digest. His hologram flickered toward Elena's light, where Malik's fire-gifted hands were already welding new sigils into the hull, glyphs that looked suspiciously like the alien's own scars. You're not the next course, the scientist gasped, collapsing. You're the teeth. Outside the observation deck, the stars twitched, not metaphorically. The black between them rippled, as if something vast had just exhaled. The crew's enhanced senses went haywire, overloaded by a presence so massive it bent space-time like a bowstring. No alarms sounded, no shields raised, because deep in their rewritten DNA, every human aboard already knew this wasn't an invasion, it was a summons. Anya's fingers found the child's healed carapace still warm. The alien had been right about one thing. Weapons didn't beg for mercy, they waited for their moment to strike. The debate in Elena's Light's war room crackled like live wires, every voice edged with the weight of a decision that could rewrite history. Admiral Carter, once the man who'd ordered enhanced children gassed, now stood before a hologram of the alien scientist's broken ship, his jaw clenched. They're the ones who designed the plague, he snapped, jabbing a finger at the projection. And now they want our help. Across the table, Dr. Petrova's hands glowed faintly, the light refracting through the scars she'd earned healing the alien child. So we let them die like rats, she countered. That makes us better. Then the air itself caught fire. Malik didn't raise his voice, he didn't need to. Blue flames spiraled up his arms, licking the ceiling as he stepped between them, his shadow stretching across the star maps like a living thing. You're missing the point, he said, so softly the room leaned in to hear. The fire wasn't threatening, it was alive, curving into shapes none of them had seen before, a gauntlet, then a bridge, then a key. This isn't about mercy. It's about math. The hologram flickered as he tapped it, zooming out to show the Devourers' advance. A wave of red-consuming star systems in perfect, hungry arcs. They're coming, and right now, his flames sketched a single, pulsing green dot amid the carnage. Earth. We're the only variable that doesn't fit their equation. The fire snapped into a perfect double helix, then shattered into embers that hovered, spinning above the table. You want to break the cycle, then we don't burn the helpless. He closed his fist. The embers flared, forming a beacon so bright it cast everyone's bones in sharp relief. We light the way. Silence. Then, from the back of the room, a sniffle. The alien child, bandaged, trembling, had crawled in unnoticed. Now they lifted their chitinous hand, their own bioluminescence flickering in answer to Malik's fire. Not a plea, a promise. Admiral Carter exhaled. His hand, when it reached for the comms, didn't shake. Prep the med bays, he ordered, and someone tell engineering we're taking on passengers. Outside the viewport, the stars didn't twinkle. They watched. The alien shipyards of Proxima Centauri had never seen welding like this. Sparks flew in fractal patterns as enhanced engineers telekinetically guided molten alloy through organic hull designs. their movements synced with the rhythmic pulses of former plague carriers now standing shoulder to shoulder with their once enemies. What began as a desperate ceasefire had become something stranger, a shared language of survival written in double helix code and starlight. In the main docking bay, Dr. Petrova's medical team worked without scalpels, their fingertips glowing as they stitched human telomeres into alien DNA. The process wasn't gentle. Alien scientists convulsed on operating slabs as their exoskeletons split to accommodate new neural pathways, their screams harmonizing with the distant thrum of hybrid engines powering up. One adolescent alien, his carapace still streaked with blue from Malik's earlier fire, gripped the human surgeon's wrist with trembling claws. "Does it hurt less if I sing?" He whispered in broken English. The answer came not in words, but in the sudden chorus of enhanced humming, a lullaby from Lagos, their voices weaving a sonic scaffold around his pain. The ships themselves were nightmares of beautiful contradiction. Sleek alien curves interrupted by jagged human armor plating, their control systems responding to both thought and touch. Hybrid pilots, their veins bioluminescent with mingled blood, tested the linkages by imagining flight paths that appeared instantly on shared neural displays. A former Bolshoi dancer, her spine now reinforced with alien ceramics, pirouetted through zero gravity to calibrate thrusters using only the precision of her enhanced muscle memory. "They wanted us to be weapons," she laughed, watching the ship's wings unfold like origami in reverse. "But nobody said we couldn't be art." When the final flagship slid from its berth, its hull bore the mark neither species had voted on but all recognized, a phoenix wrought in alien metal and human flame, one wing tipped with the Devourer's own stolen sigils. The crest didn't symbolize victory, it promised something far more dangerous: reinvention. As the Armada's warp drives engaged, the very stars seemed to flinch. This wasn't just an alliance, it was evolution in its rawest form, screaming into the void with 1,000 voices that all carried the same message: adapt or burn. Space twisted like a dying star's last gasp as the entity unfurled into reality, not a ship, not a beast, but a living black hole stitched from devoured civilizations, its edges gnawing at the fabric of spacetime itself. The hybrid fleet's opening salvo should have carved continents into its flank. Instead, plasma bolts and kinetic rounds vanished into that yawning dark without so much as a ripple, swallowed whole like screams into a storm. Admiral Carter's voice cracked across the comms, raw with disbelief. "It's not absorbing the attacks, it's erasing them from existence." Then the static hit. Every screen, every neural link, every flickering holo display dissolved into screaming fractal patterns, the same ones Elena had scrawled in her own blood on that final chalkboard. The entity wasn't just attacking, it was broadcasting, a single glyph pulsing in the shared consciousness of every enhanced aboard, a spiral not consuming its tail but regurgitating it. Anya reeled as the meaning detonated in her skull. This was no mindless predator. It was a recycling plant for failed experiments, chewing up the universe's weak links and spitting them back as raw material. Malik's fire guttered out mid-leap, his flames snuffed like candles in a vacuum. Across the battle line, alien ships convulsed as their bioorganic systems remembered circuitry reverting to pre-plague configurations, muscles atrophying mid-stride. The entity wasn't killing them, it was resetting them. It's trying to undo the adaptation. Wren's warning came too late. The first hybrid vessel cracked open like an egg, its merged human-alien crew screaming as their DNA unraveled into base pairs, their enhancements rewritten into genetic white noise. Then the virus woke up, deep in the entity's code, the same code that had birthed the original plague. A subroutine flickered to life. Not Elena's voice. Something older, a backdoor she'd woven into the pathogen's core, a fail-safe buried so deep even the Devourers hadn't scraped it clean. The message wasn't transmitted. It vomited itself into reality through every open channel, raw and primal. Adapt. Human and alien systems locked up in perfect sync, their merged biology recognizing the command not as a word but as a trigger. Malik's fire reignited not blue now, but a blinding silver hotter than any star. Anya's med scanner overloaded, its readings spiraling into impossible numbers as her cells began editing the entity's emissions midair, turning erasure into fuel. The entity recoiled. For the first time in its existence, something had bitten back. The real shock came when the hybrid ships moved, not away, but into the entity's event horizon. Hulls disintegrated, yes, crews burned, but the ones who made it through, they came out changed, not reset, not erased, upgraded. Their fused flesh and metal bodies now pulsed with the same voracious hunger as the entity itself, their new forms singing a chorus that shook the void. You wanted evolution. Here's your damn evolution. The entity's last scream wasn't defeat. It was revelation, a sound less like destruction and more like a lock clicking open. Because the universe's great filter had just met the one species reckless enough to drink the poison and demand the antidote. The entity's death throes shook the solar system like a dying god's final scream, its fracturing form lashing out with tendrils of distorted physics that scored deep wounds across the face of Earth's sun. Solar flares erupted in slow-motion arcs, each one a potential extinction event curling toward Mercury's orbit until the enhanced scientists struck back with something far more dangerous than weapons. Sympathy. 12 telekinetics locked hands in a ring around Geneva's shattered collider, their collective will forming a net woven from quantum entanglement and raw desperation. You could see the strain in their trembling limbs, the way their hair whitened strand by strand as they siphoned years off their own lifespans to power the stabilization field. Dr. Anya Petrova's voice cracked over the comms, her Russian accent thick with exhaustion, not pulling it back together, teaching it how to remember what whole feels like. And the sun listened. The solar flares didn't just stop, they curled backward in impossible loops, stitching the corona's wounds with golden thread made from the scientist's own neural impulses. On the observation decks, unenhanced astronomers wept as their instruments registered the impossible, a star healing faster than entropy should allow. By the time the last fracture sealed, the telekinetic circle had collapsed into a pile of withered figures, their skin translucent as parchment over bones that glowed faintly with residual energy. The youngest among them, a 23-year-old grad student from Nairobi, lifted a shaking hand toward the now calm sky, her laughter sounding decades older than her body. "Worth it," she croaked, watching sunlight dance across her skeletal fingers. Her words hung in the air like a manifesto. Humanity hadn't just survived the devourers. We'd rewritten the rules of mercy, sacrificing not for victory, but for the right to keep singing lullabies under a safe sky. As the first untainted dawn broke over the Andes, the withered scientists slept like satisfied infants, their dreams humming with the sun's restored heartbeat. The colony ship's observation deck hummed with the quiet pulse of recycled air, the stars outside stretched into streaks by warp speed. Little Ava pressed her nose against the glass, breath fogging the view as she tugged at her grandmother's sleeve. "Nonna," she whispered, eyes wide with the question every child asked eventually. "Is it true about the plague?" The old woman's hand, knuckles gnarled, veins tracing faint blue beneath papery skin, twitched in response. Sparks flickered to life between her fingers, dancing in patterns that cast jagged shadows across Ava's face. Not the wild blaze of Malik's fire, nor the surgical precision of Ren's telekinesis. Something quieter, something inherited. "We didn't survive," Nonna murmured, catching a spark in her palm like a firefly. It pulsed there, a tiny heartbeat of light. "We became." The words hung between them, heavy with the weight of centuries. Outside, the stars blurred past, reminders of worlds where bones still lay in the ruins of cities that couldn't adapt. Ava reached out, her own fingertips brushing the spark. For a dizzying second she felt it, the echo of 1,000 heartbeats sinking across time, the whisper of Elena's last broadcast woven into her DNA. The lesson wasn't in the old vids of burning cities or the museum ships preserved in orbit. It was in the way Ava's classmates bent light to paint with their hands, the way her teacher's voice could calm storms before they brewed. Survival had never been the point. The plague was a door kicked open, and humanity, we walked through wearing the Devourer's own claws as jewelry. Nana's spark flared brighter, etching a constellation onto Ava's palm, a map of scars and starlight. "You'll ask better questions than we did," she said, closing the child's fingers around it. The spark didn't burn. It remembered. The stars no longer flicker like distant candles. They hum with the pulse of 1,000 hybrid cities, their spires built from human steel and alien chitin arcing toward the heavens in perfect symmetry. On what was once Mars, children with bioluminescent freckles skip across terraformed canals, their laughter bending gravity just enough to make raindrops spiral upward like glitter. The old fears seem almost quaint now. The divisions between human and alien, enhanced and baseline, reduced to footnotes in history vids played for nostalgia. A new transmission crackles through the shared consciousness of the merged species, its message no longer a warning but a chorus: survival is unity. The words ripple outward, carried by solar winds and quantum entanglement, echoing through the veins of those who remember when Earth's skies burned. Malik's descendants tend gardens where flame dances in harmony with alien photosynthesis, weaving together ecosystems that shouldn't coexist. Ren's lineage crafts neural symphonies from the psychic imprints of long-dead devourers, turning nightmares into art. And somewhere in the void, Elena's light still flies, its hull now grown into a living archive where the whispers of the past mingle with the dreams of civilizations yet unborn. The screen dims, but the fire remains not the destructive blaze of war, but the steady glow of a forge where something new is being hammered into shape. Not an ending, a beginning, and as the darkness settles, one truth lingers like the scent of ozone after a storm. The universe tried to break humanity. Instead, we became its glue.